Hi everyone, I'm Dennis. Welcome to my bindery. I've been making books on YouTube for over 3 years now, and I often get comments from folks who would like to try bookbinding, but are put off by either the quantity or cost of the tools I use. If that sounds familiar, then this is the video for you. You don't need a ton of fancy tools to get started making your own books. In this video, I'll share what I'd recommend as a beginner's toolkit, just the basics to get you started, which is mostly things you probably already have in your own home, or which can be found inexpensively, and I'll show you some DIY options that cost next to nothing. This video is the first in my beginner bookbinding series. In future videos, I'll show you how to use these tools to make some simple notebooks, and then down the road I'll show you how to make some more gear to expand your toolbox beyond the basics. So if that sounds like something for you, let's get started. By definition, the word bind means to secure something by way of tying it up. So in my opinion, the most important bookbinding tool is this, the humble sewing needle. It's this little piece of metal that makes all the difference between an unruly sheaf of loose papers and what we would call a book. And while there are other methods of binding that don't rely on sewing, to my mind those are prone to failure, and so I prefer good old needle and thread. You can usually find needles in variety packs for just a few dollars, but not all needles are suitable for bookbinding. Medium-sized needles, in the number 14 to 18 range, are a good all-round choice. Look for those that have a similar thickness at the eye of the needle as the rest of the shank. A needle with a wide eye will tend to get stuck going through the paper, which is not only frustrating, but could be made worse if the needle snaps off at the eye from all the twisting and levering. A good needle can handle two important bookbinding tasks. One is obviously pulling thread, but in a pinch you can also use your needle to pre-punch the holes in your paper. Depending on the type of paper you're using, you can pierce 6, 8, or more sheets of paper at a time. With your holes pierced, you can then attach your thread to the same needle for sewing, or you could invest in a second needle with a rounded tip for this task. I find this type of needle is especially good for beginners, as the rounded end tends to follow the pre-pierced holes, and is less prone to stabbing through the paper, the thread, or you. And by having a second needle for sewing, you can upgrade your first needle, but more on that later. The second tool I would choose if I found myself binding books on a desert island would be a simple utility knife. This little blade can handle all manner of tasks around the island, from cleaning fish to cracking open coconut. A sharp blade can be used for cutting sewing thread, trimming paper, and even heavier tasks like cutting leather or grayboard. The blades are replaceable and should be snapped off as sections become dull. I prefer the smaller variety of utility knife, though the large box cutter type will work as well, because the business end is essentially the same. The differences are in the style of the handle. Some nice features to consider are a blade snapping tool built into the base, a blade lock to prevent accidents, or onboard storage for extra blades. None of these features change the basic functionality of cutting though, so if all you have is a simple knife, you're good to go. Third up in the basic toolkit is a steel ruler. Unlike rulers made of wood, plastic, or even aluminum or brass, a good steel ruler will last a lifetime, and when paired with your utility knife, it makes for a versatile measuring, marking, and paper cutting system. You can use either a metric or imperial system ruler according to your preference, though I prefer a double-sided one with each scale on either side. A standard 12-inch or 30-centimeter ruler is a good all-round length. Whatever ruler you choose, it should have clear markings. Inexpensive rulers will have the scale painted on, and this can wear off over time. Look for one with etched markings. If you're not sure, run your fingernail over the lines. If they feel smooth, then they're probably painted on. With an etched ruler, your fingernail will noticeably catch on each marking. If you can, avoid rulers where the scale doesn't begin at the very end. Having an accurate square end on your ruler means you can use it to make precise layout marks with your knife. Align the edge of your paper with your desired length, then use your blade to score a small mark at the other end. Two small ticks in your paper can be bent upwards to then register the ruler to make the final cut. With practice, the knife and ruler combo can even be used for trimming the edges of your books. Not to be confused with those things in filing cabinets, a bookbinding folder is a tool that is like an extension of your hand. Traditionally made of bone, folders tend to be long and narrow, with smooth edges that glide over paper. As the name suggests, they are used primarily for folding, but more generally you should think of a folder as the tool you reach for anytime you want to exert firm, precise pressure on your work. They excel at creating crisp creases in individual sheets of paper or consolidating folded sections. When gluing papers together, such as in pasting down end papers, a folder helps to squeeze out excess glue or air bubbles, ensuring a good bond. Folders can have a variety of end profiles, the most common of which are rounded, pointed, or square. A rounded end is like an alternative fingertip, able to poke in and smooth out areas a clumsy finger can't reach. The pointed tip is even more precise and is unrivaled when it comes to making fine adjustments, while a squared end is better suited to straight lines and sharp corners. As I said before, the traditional material for folders is bone. Modern equivalents made of Teflon have similar properties, with the added bonus that they will not accidentally burnish your materials. These can be expensive, however, so here are some cheap DIY alternatives. Wood is a good substitute material with which to make your own folder, though you should be mindful of what type of wood you use. Softwoods like pine or spruce are not durable enough for prolonged use, while very hard woods like maple can be difficult to work with hand tools. Ideally, use a medium density wood with a tight grain structure like poplar or birch. If you have some wood and aren't sure what it is or if it's suitable, test it with your fingernail. If your fingernail easily dents the wood, it's too soft. If you can't mark it at all, it's too hard. Something between those two extremities is what you're looking for. And if you don't have any wood at all, maybe check with your local paint store. Paint stir sticks are often made of medium density wood, and they are about the right dimensions to make into a folder. And even better, they're usually free, though check with your local paint people first. Shaping a folder is about the easiest woodworking you can do. Draw your preferred folder design on your piece of wood. The size and shape is entirely up to you, though try to keep the long edges as straight as possible. If you have a small saw, it will help, though whittling the piece down with just a knife is entirely possible. Just be sure to always cut away from yourself. Next, shape the edges of your folder to have a gentle round over on one side, using your knife, coarse sandpaper, or if you have one, a small block plane. The other side should be relatively flat. Once the shape has been refined, sand the folder thoroughly with sandpaper, starting with a coarse grit and working your way up to extra fine. Finally, apply a simple finish to your folder like beeswax or linseed oil. Just be sure to choose a finish that will dry completely and not transfer from the folder onto your work. Once you've made one folder, you'll probably want to try different shapes and sizes, so make as many as you like. And if you're really in a hurry and you need to crease some papers fast, reach for a Sharpie marker. The smooth barrel makes a good folder in a pinch. Just be careful not to rub the logo off onto your work. This next tool serves a function we've already covered, but since it makes that task so much easier, I'm including it as one of the main basic tools. This is an awl. Like the sewing needle from the beginning, the awl can pierce sewing holes, but the addition of a handle increases its power, allowing you to pierce more or thicker paper, or even materials like leather or cover boards. There are different types of awls available, so find one that suits your needs. Smaller ones are good for piercing paper, while those with larger diameter shanks work for both paper and heavier materials. Whatever size, the awl should have a sharp and smooth blade of hardened steel and a comfortable handle. Handles with flat areas prevent the tool from rolling off the table. It could be that an awl is a bit out of reach for some people, but don't worry, I've got you covered with a do-it-yourself option. Do you remember that stout sewing needle from earlier? Well, it can be easily repurposed into a basic awl, and all you need is a cork. Carefully drive the sharp end of the needle vertically into the end of the cork. This is tough to do just by hand, so put the cork on the table and push the needle firmly with something else. Here I'm using a bit of leftover wood. Press it in about an inch or so, or about 25 millimeters. Next, pull the needle back out and reverse it, placing the eye end into the hole you just made. Be extra careful now as the sharp point is exposed. Holding the cork, push the needle against something firm like a piece of wood to drive the eye down into place. If you like, you can add a bit of glue into the hole, but I found that because the eye is slightly wider, it will be gripped firmly enough in the cork not to fall out. And in use, the force of using the tool constantly tends to push the needle back in anyway. Now you've got a DIY awl that works great for piercing holes. So to recap, my basic bookbinding tools are a needle, knife, folder, ruler, and awl. With these 5 tools, it's possible to bind several different types of books, and I use these 5 tools in every single book that I make, no matter how elaborate. Did I forget anything? What are your must-have bookbinding tools? Let me know in the comments down below. In my next beginner bookbinding video, I'll discuss some basic materials, and then we'll use your starter toolkit to put them all together and make a quick and easy notebook. If you found this video useful, then please click the like button and consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't already. It really does help. If you'd like to support me directly, then the easiest way to do so is to simply buy me a coffee. You'll find a link in the video description below. Cheers! As always, I'm Dennis. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.